The rocket jerked so violently that for a second I thought the entire stack was coming apart beneath us. My helmet slammed against the seat, the G-forces climbed past anything I'd felt in training, and suddenly alarms lit up the control panel like a Christmas tree. We were supposed to be in smooth ascent, 5 minutes after launch. Instead, the Soyuz was shaking like a metal coffin being hammered shut. I caught Oleg's eyes through the corner of my visor. He didn't even try to hide it, he mouthed. "Abort?" My stomach turned. The launch escape tower had already been jettisoned. If the rocket failed now, we'd have to trust the capsule's backup separation systems, untested at this speed, at this altitude. Mission Control's voice cracked in over the roar of engines. Soyuz 18, staging failure. Second stage did not separate. Stand by. Stand by. We were strapped to a missile half working, half dead, and accelerating toward the edge of space. If the engines tore free at the wrong angle, the capsule would rip apart with us inside. The vibration worsened, a deep metallic growl shaking through my spine. I gripped the hand controllers until my fingers went numb. Oleg's breathing filled the calm line, fast, sharp, but controlled. And in that chaos, with thousands of kilograms of fuel exploding under us, one thought carved its way through my head. We're not supposed to survive this. The first seconds after hearing "staging failure" felt like an eternity inside the capsule. The vibrations were stronger than anything I had felt in hundreds of hours of training in the centrifuge. It wasn't just pressure on the chest anymore, it felt like the entire vehicle was trembling from somewhere deep in the structure. The panel in front of us showed mixed signals. The second stage engines had shut down, but the separation command hadn't released the stage. That meant the third stage was trying to ignite while still locked to the dead weight of the second stage. A mistake like that could tear the rocket into pieces in a fraction of a second. Oleg shouted over the intercom, his voice sharp and fast, "Separation incomplete. Systems disagreeing. We're locked." His words didn't need explanation. I could see it myself. The indicator lights that should have switched to "stage clear" were stuck in transition. The rocket was burning fuel, but we were dragging the extra tonnage behind us. We were climbing, but the stresses on the frame were unpredictable, and if the explosive bolts triggered late, we would be hit by the shock at a velocity that might split the capsule open. My instinct was to reach for the manual abort control. Every fiber of my body screamed to pull the lever, to get out of this failing stack before it ripped us apart. But Oleg grabbed my arm, not to stop me but to get me to look at him. He shouted, his voice cracked under the noise, "Wait for ground. We don't know if the separation will complete. If we abort now, we could cut right into ignition." Mission Control cut in again, the voice steady but clipped. "Soyuz 18, do not engage manual. Await automatic abort sequence." Easy for them to say. They weren't being rattled around like screws inside a metal drum at 7 kilometers per second. Still, they had the bigger picture. We were trained to trust the ground, but in that moment trust was a fragile thing. The G-forces kept climbing. My body was pressed so hard into the seat I felt my vision narrowing at the edges. Sweat ran down into my eyes, and I couldn't even wipe it away. The vibration was now a violent pounding. Each second, I expected the panel in front of me to go black as the capsule lost power, or worse, for the walls to buckle inward. I shouted into the microphone, my throat raw, "Confirm sequence status. Confirm abort logic." I didn't care how desperate it sounded. I wanted answers. The reply was slower than I could stand. "Soyuz 18, abort will trigger automatically if separation sensors fail to confirm by programmed limit. Hold positions." The problem was that programmed limit wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for machine tolerances, not for the men strapped inside. That meant we had to ride this unstable rocket until the computer decided enough was enough. Every instinct in me wanted to act sooner, but I forced myself to sit frozen, gripping the controllers, waiting for the system to make the choice. Oleg's breathing was heavy, but his voice was even. "Vasya, keep steady. We trained for failures. It will cut off. Trust it." His calmness was half real, half for my sake, I knew. He was younger than me, but in that moment his composure kept me from yanking the lever. I nodded, but the movement was barely possible under the load pressing me down. Then the panel flashed red. The abort system had triggered. A blunt alarm tone filled the cabin. I heard the thump as the capsule pyrotechnics fired. The sound was not one bang but a series, sharp cracks echoing through the shell. The separation motors lit, and the entire capsule lurched violently away from the rocket. The transition was instant and brutal. One moment we were being shoved forward by thrust, the next we were being kicked sideways by escape engines. The forces didn't ease, they multiplied. The G-meter spiked past 10. My vision tunneled until I could barely see the outline of Oleg in the seat beside me. I tried to keep breathing in short, shallow bursts, but it felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. My arms were pinned. I could not move my legs at all. For a few seconds I wasn't sure if I was even conscious or if I was slipping in and out. I remember thinking, this is how it ends. Crushed before even reaching space. Somewhere through the fog I heard Oleg grunt, almost laugh in disbelief, "Hold on. Hold on." His words were half lost in the roar of the escape motors, but they reached me. I forced myself to focus. The escape sequence had worked. We were no longer strapped to the rocket, which was probably disintegrating below us at that very moment. Now the question was whether the capsule could survive the forces tearing at it. When the escape engines cut off, silence hit me harder than the noise had. Only the rasp of our breathing and the faint hiss of the cabin systems remained. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 kilos. I struggled to lift my head. The indicator showed we were on a ballistic trajectory. That meant no orbit, no station, just a high arc and then a fall back into the atmosphere. The abort had saved our lives for now, but it had also doomed the mission. And with the speed we were carrying, re-entry would not be gentle. I turned my head with effort and met Oleg's eyes. Neither of us needed to say it out loud, but I did anyway, because silence was worse. "We're not done. Now we survive re-entry." He nodded once, then closed his eyes, drawing in a long, slow breath. The hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. The silence after separation did not last long. Within a minute the capsule began to shake again, this time not from engines but from the unstable path we had been thrown into. The abort system had yanked us away from the rocket with brutal force, and now we were coasting upward on a steep, uncontrolled trajectory. The altimeter showed we were climbing past 190 kilometers, higher than we had ever trained for in an abort scenario. It meant we were going to come down just as steep, and at a velocity that would test every bolt holding the capsule together. I reported to ground, my voice uneven. "We confirm ballistic trajectory. Requesting re-entry parameters." The headset crackled with static before the reply came. "Soyuz 18, prepare for steep re-entry. Estimated load above nominal. Stay on checklist." The way they said, "above nominal," told me everything. They had no precise number. The computers on the ground were calculating in real time, but we were already beyond the edge of the tested envelope. Oleg swore under his breath, then muttered, "Ballistic means 10, maybe 12 Gs." He knew as well as I did what that meant. Most people lose consciousness around that threshold. If we blacked out at the wrong moment, we would never wake up. We started working through the emergency checklist. My fingers felt clumsy, not from nerves but from the strain still lingering in my arms after the escape burn. Each switch had to be confirmed twice. Oleg read out the procedure: attitude control, manual confirm. Power distribution, nominal. Cabin pressure, holding. My own voice answered each one, slower than usual. I forced myself to stay precise because mistakes now would kill us faster than the descent. As the capsule pitched downward, the first drag against the upper atmosphere began. The vibration returned, rougher than during ascent, as if the entire structure was being shaken from outside. The heat shield indicators switched to active. I knew that meant the plasma was already forming around us. Outside the windows there was nothing but a red glow, as if the air itself had turned liquid. My chest tightened, but I kept my eyes locked on the gauges. The G-meter began to climb. 4, 6, then 9. My body felt like it was sinking through the seat into the floor. Breathing became a deliberate act. I had to force air into my lungs in short bursts, otherwise my chest would lock. Oleg's voice came in short, broken phrases: hold, breathing, shallow. His words were as much for himself as for me. At 12 Gs my vision darkened around the edges. My hands slipped off the panel, I could not lift them anymore. I tried to speak into the mic but only a strained sound came out. Somewhere through the pressure I heard Oleg's strange shout, almost like he was fighting to stay awake. Stay with me, Vasily. Breathe. I blinked rapidly, trying to keep focus. The cabin rattled as if the bolts were loosening one by one. I thought I saw sparks at the edges of the panel, maybe my vision playing tricks under the load, maybe real. The noise outside was a continuous roar, not like engines but like the sky itself tearing around us. The G-meter peaked at over 20 before dropping sharply. I could not believe the number at first, convinced my eyes were failing. My body felt beyond pain, more like it had gone numb. For a few terrifying seconds I thought I had lost consciousness, but then my vision cleared slightly. The pressure eased just enough for me to take a deeper breath. My throat burned from the effort. Report. Mission Control demanded through the comm, but Oleg answered first. We are alive. Capsule intact. Systems operational. His voice was hoarse, unsteady, but clear enough to carry conviction. I wanted to add something, to confirm myself, but I could not yet form words. My jaw felt locked. We had survived the peak load, but the descent was far from over. The capsule was still tumbling slightly, not in a clean orientation. The automatic stabilizers fired in bursts, each correction shaking us further. I saw the landing indicators counting down altitude faster than expected. The computer projected our impact point somewhere in the Altai mountains, hundreds of kilometers off the intended recovery zone. That meant no immediate rescue, no helicopters waiting nearby, only forested terrain and snow. Oleg noticed it too. We are coming down short. Survival packs ready? I managed a nod. My body still ached from the G-load, but training drilled reflexes deeper than fatigue. We checked the straps on our suits, confirmed the packs were latched to our seats, confirmed the parachute indicators. Each confirmation felt like a victory, small but necessary to keep the mind steady. Then came the main parachute deployment. The shock was abrupt, snapping us forward in our harnesses. My helmet hit the headrest behind me hard enough to rattle my teeth. I groaned but forced myself back to the panel. The descent slowed, though not smoothly. The wind outside buffeted us, spinning the capsule slightly, but at least we were no longer falling at terminal velocity. For the first time since separation, I allowed myself to believe we might actually survive this. But that thought was quickly replaced by a new worry: landing in the wrong place could be almost as dangerous as failing in the sky. The Altai mountains were remote, cold, and unforgiving. I said it aloud, my voice still shaky. We're not finished. Landing site unknown. Prepare for survival. Oleg gave a tight nod. We'll manage. One step at a time. His words were firm, but I could see in his face the exhaustion, the toll of what we had just endured. As the ground rushed up beneath us, I gripped the straps and braced. My entire body ached, but my mind was suddenly clear. The confrontation was not with the rocket anymore, it was with the Earth waiting below. The landing came without grace. The Soyuz capsule struck the mountainside hard enough to rattle every bone in my body. The seat's shock absorbers compressed with a loud crack, the straps dug into my shoulders, and my helmet smashed against the headrest again. For a moment there was no up or down, only a brutal jolt and the sound of metal groaning as the capsule scraped against rock and snow. Then, stillness. The parachute collapsed outside, and only the faint hiss of air leaking through vents broke the silence inside. My hands were trembling as I reached for the panel to confirm integrity. The gauges showed pressure holding. That was something. Oleg let out a long breath and said flatly, "We are down." His voice carried neither triumph nor relief, only exhaustion. My body felt heavy and stiff, every muscle sore from the punishing re-entry forces. I unclipped the harness with difficulty and floated for half a second before gravity pulled me sideways into the cramped wall of the capsule. We were lying at an angle, half buried in snow, the window fogged from condensation. "Ground, this is Soyuz 18. We confirm landing." "Coordinates unknown," I reported, my throat raw. There was no immediate reply. The mountains cut off radio contact, and I realized we might be on our own longer than expected. Oleg checked the antenna deployment, then shook his head. "No signal. We'll have to wait until recovery birds get a fix." That could mean hours, maybe more. We went into survival protocol. I pulled the orange emergency packs from behind our seats. Each pack contained thermal blankets, rations, flares, and a pistol designed for both defense and signaling. The irony of carrying a gun into space never left me, but here, in the wilderness, it suddenly felt practical. The capsule's small cabin grew colder as the system shut down, so we layered ourselves in extra clothing from the packs. My fingers were clumsy, swollen from circulation strain, but I managed to zip up the insulated jacket. Oleg passed me a foil blanket and muttered, "We'll need to conserve heat." We decided to stay inside until we had some sense of our location. For all we knew, we could be perched on a ridge, and stepping outside blindly could end in a fall. I scraped frost off the small window with my glove. Outside, I saw nothing but white slopes and jagged rocks. Snow was blowing sideways in strong gusts. I said quietly, "We're high. Probably above 2,000 meters." Oleg nodded without looking, busy checking the oxygen levels in our suits. He confirmed they were adequate for emergencies but not meant for long exposure. After about 20 minutes, we tried the radio again. Static answered us. The mountains were blocking the signal completely. Oleg tapped the side of his helmet and said, "They'll know the trajectory. They'll search this sector. We just have to hold on." His confidence was measured, not blind optimism, but the weight of waiting pressed on me. The capsule was growing colder by the hour. We switched to chemical heat packs, cracking them open and pressing them against our bodies under the suits. The smell of the chemicals filled the air, sharp and bitter, but the warmth was worth it. We huddled close, conserving as much body heat as possible. At one point Oleg chuckled, not out of humor but disbelief. "We trained for years, fly into orbit, and here we are freezing like mountaineers." I allowed myself a dry smile and answered, "At least mountaineers choose where to climb." Hunger was not an issue yet, but thirst quickly became one. We melted snow in a small canister from the pack, holding it over a chemical heater. The first sip burned my throat, still sore from re-entry strain, but it revived me. My body felt less sluggish, and I could think more clearly. We agreed to ration the supplies carefully. Rescues usually came within a day, but nothing about this mission had gone according to plan. As darkness approached, the temperature inside dropped further. We heard no aircraft overhead, no signals on the radio, nothing but the wind outside pressing against the hull. Oleg leaned back in his seat and said in a low voice, "If they don't find us by tomorrow, we'll have to move. Staying in this capsule too long will kill us." I considered the risk. Climbing down the slopes in suits and boots not designed for trekking was almost as dangerous as staying put, but he was right. If the cold deepened, the capsule would become uninhabitable. We passed the hours in silence, occasionally checking the panel to confirm nothing critical had failed. At one point the capsule creaked, and snow slid down its side, making us tense, but it held. I closed my eyes for a short time, though sleep was impossible. Images of the rocket tearing apart replayed in my head, followed by flashes of the crushing G-forces. My neck ached as if the weight still pressed down on me. The night was long. We spoke little, saving energy. I thought about my family, about how news of a failed launch would be spreading by now. I wondered if they knew we had survived the abort, or if they were preparing for the worst. The uncertainty gnawed at me more than the cold. At dawn we tried the radio again. Static. But then, faintly, a voice broke through. "Soyuz 18, do you copy?" Both of us leaned forward at once. I nearly shouted into the mic, "This is Soyuz 18. We copy. We are alive. Request recovery instructions." The signal was weak, broken by interference, but it was enough. The relief in Oleg's face mirrored mine. The search teams were out there, triangulating. It meant we just had to hold on a little longer. I turned to Oleg and said, "We made it through the rocket. We made it through re-entry. Now we wait. That's all." He gave a tired smile, the first real one since launch. "Yes. Now we wait." We leaned back in our seats, the frost still creeping along the metal walls, but for the first time since the abort, survival felt like more than just a chance. It felt possible. When the first faint signal from ground control reached us, I realized how desperate I had been for a human voice outside our capsule. The words were broken and hard to understand, but they carried one truth: someone knew we were alive. The relief lasted only a moment before the next silence returned. The mountains cut the connection again, and we were left inside the frozen shell, clinging to the knowledge that at least somewhere out there, people were trying to reach us. Oleg adjusted the headset repeatedly, leaning forward as if pushing his body closer would pull the signal through. "We can't count on continuous comms," he muttered, mostly to himself. "They'll sweep the area. We'll get contact again." His voice was calm, but the strain was clear. I watched the frost forming on his helmet visor where his breath condensed, and it struck me how fragile we were in this situation. After all the training, after being strapped to thousands of tons of rocket fuel, it was a failing stage separation and a steep mountain that nearly ended us. We decided to conserve power in the capsule. Lights were dimmed, unnecessary systems shut down, and we huddled in our suits with heat packs pressed against our chests. The cold still gnawed at us, crawling into every joint. After hours of silence, I finally spoke. "If recovery takes longer, if the weather worsens, what then?" The question hung in the air. Oleg did not answer immediately. He rubbed his gloved hands together before saying slowly, "Then we do what we always do. We follow the procedures, we keep moving, and we don't give in. But don't think about later. Focus on the next hour. That is how you survive." His words carried weight because they came not from optimism but from the discipline drilled into us. Still, my mind wandered. I thought about my wife and daughter, about how news agencies were probably broadcasting stories of a failed launch. I wondered if they had been told we survived. My chest tightened at the thought of them waiting, fearing the worst. I said aloud, more to myself than to Oleg, "I don't want them to remember me as another lost crew." Oleg looked at me directly, his eyes tired but steady. "We are not lost. We are sitting here, breathing, speaking. That's already more than what some others got. We owe it to them to walk out of this." His voice was rough, but the conviction cut through the cold. It reminded me of comrades who had never returned, names we rarely spoke but always carried with us. Hours dragged on, broken only by brief, static-filled bursts of communication. At one point, the ground asked for medical status. I forced strength into my voice, 2 crew alive. Conscious. Moderate physical strain, no critical injuries. Cabin temperature below safe range. Request urgent recovery. I could hear the emotion in the controller's reply even through the static. Copy. Hold position. Rescue units are moving. That was all, but it was enough. As night approached again, darkness settled around us, and the capsule grew colder. We could see our breath in the air like clouds. We wrapped ourselves tighter in blankets, but the metal walls radiated the cold back at us. My body ached, not only from re-entry but from the stiffness of sitting in one position for so long. Oleg shifted uncomfortably and said quietly, "Do you ever think about why we do this? Why we climb into these machines, knowing what can happen?" I answered without hesitation. Because someone has to. Because every step we take makes the next flight safer. If we stop, then all those risks taken before us mean nothing. My voice cracked as I added, but in moments like this, yes, I ask myself if it was worth it. He nodded slowly. I ask too. Not in training, not during launch. Only now, when it comes down to cold and waiting. But I think about what we've seen, even in training, the Earth from above, and I know the answer. He paused, then added in a lower tone, "It is worth it, even if it ends like this." That sentence lingered in the cabin. For the first time since the abort, I confronted the possibility that we might not be rescued in time. The thought brought no panic, just a heavy clarity. I looked at him and said quietly, "If it does end here, I'm glad it was with you. There's no one else I'd rather share this with." He gave a tired smile. "Likewise, Vasily. But let's not make this our last flight yet." We sat in silence after that, the weight of those words hanging in the frozen air. The wind howled outside, rocking the capsule slightly, as if reminding us how small we were compared to the mountains. Every creak in the metal felt like a warning, but the structure held. Near midnight, another faint transmission broke through. Soyuz 18, search aircraft report visual contact. Rescue units inbound. Estimate arrival within several hours. Hold tight. This time both of us let out audible sighs. Oleg leaned back and closed his eyes, whispering, "They found us." I felt my body unclench for the first time since launch. Exhaustion overcame me, but relief carried me through it. Before we allowed ourselves to rest, we exchanged one last conversation, quiet and deliberate. I said, "Tomorrow we'll walk out of this capsule. We'll see the sky again without a window in front of it." Oleg opened his eyes, looked at me, and replied, "And we'll carry this with us for the rest of our lives. Not as failure. As proof." I nodded. Proof that we endured. We closed our eyes then, not fully asleep but in a half-conscious state, holding on to the promise of recovery. In that final conversation before rescue, fear gave way to acceptance, and acceptance turned into resolve. Whatever came next, we had already survived the worst. The sound of rotor blades reached us before the first light of dawn. It was faint at first, almost drowned out by the wind, but unmistakable after the long silence of the mountains. I shook Oleg awake, though he had never fully slept, and we pressed our helmets against the metal to confirm it was real. The noise grew stronger, circling above, then fading, then returning again. They were searching the ridges and valleys around us. Oleg switched on the handheld beacon from the survival pack and extended the antenna through the hatch opening we had cleared. A minute later, the signal light blinked in response from above. We knew then that rescue was only a matter of time. The capsule shuddered when the helicopter settled nearby. The noise outside was a violent storm of wind and snow. We heard muffled shouts and the scrape of boots on ice. A knock came against the hull, and a voice called out, barely audible, "Cosmonauts, we are here. Stay inside until we secure the capsule." Relief washed through me so suddenly I nearly laughed. Oleg grinned despite the exhaustion carved into his face. "They came. We can go home." When they opened the hatch, the freezing wind swept inside, harsher than anything we had felt during the night. Two men in heavy coats leaned in, their faces red from the cold. They helped us unclip the last straps and guided us out. My legs trembled as I touched the snow, weak from the crushing G-forces and the hours of stillness. For a moment I thought they would collapse, but the rescuers held me upright. Oleg stepped out behind me, moving stiffly but with determination. We stood together on the slope, snow up to our knees, the capsule half buried behind us, and looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. The sight of open sky was enough. The helicopter ride down from the mountains was a blur. Wrapped in blankets and strapped into seats, we listened to the engines roar while medics checked our pulse, blood pressure, and pupils. They asked if we had lost consciousness during re-entry. I told them honestly that I was not sure. The darkness at 20 GS had felt close enough to blackout. Oleg admitted he had nearly passed out as well. The medics exchanged looks that told me they were surprised we were conscious at all. When we landed at the forward base, more officials and doctors swarmed us. They congratulated us on surviving, but their faces carried a mix of relief and embarrassment. Surviving was not the same as success. The mission had failed before it truly began, and the spacecraft that was supposed to take us to orbit had instead left us stranded in the mountains. Still, the doctors insisted on running every possible test. Blood samples, reflex checks, chest X-rays. My body felt battered, my head heavy, but I complied with everything. I knew they were not only caring for us but also collecting data, because our ordeal had pushed human tolerance beyond what was documented. In the hours that followed, we gave our first debrief to the engineers. I described in detail the vibrations during staging, the warning indicators, the moment the abort sequence fired. Oleg added his own observations about the delayed separation and the performance of the escape system. The engineers took notes furiously, some of them pale as they realized how close the vehicle had come to destroying itself and us along with it. One of them finally said quietly, "This failure will change the design." I remember answering without hesitation, "It has to. We cannot ask crews to gamble like this again." Later, when I finally had a moment alone, I thought about the sequence of events. The rocket had failed us, but the systems meant to save us had worked, even under conditions never tested before. We had survived because of that, and because we had trusted the procedures long enough for the abort to trigger automatically. It was not heroism. It was discipline, training, and the refusal to act on fear. Yet it had been close enough that any mistake, any premature pull of a lever, would have changed the outcome completely. That realization stayed with me more than anything else. When we were finally reunited with our families, the weight of the ordeal hit harder than the G-forces. My daughter clung to me as if afraid I would disappear again. My wife's eyes were wet, but she said nothing, only held me with both arms. For them, the news of a launch failure had come first, without confirmation of survival. The hours they had spent believing I was gone had left their mark. I realized then that surviving was not only for ourselves or for the program, but for them, the ones waiting on the ground. In the weeks that followed, the investigation confirmed what we already knew: a staging failure, caused by a malfunction in the separation mechanism, had forced the abort. It was recorded as one of the harshest re-entries ever survived by humans. The data from our bodies became case studies. Engineers redesigned systems to prevent a repeat. The mission itself disappeared into the background of the program, written as a failure, but our survival became proof that even in disaster, there was knowledge to be gained. When I look back, I do not think of it as the mission that failed. I think of it as the flight that showed us the limits of what people could endure and still return. I remember the crushing weight, the burning cold, the silence in the capsule broken only by two voices holding each other steady. I remember the moment we heard the rotor blades in the morning and knew we had been found. It taught me that spaceflight is not only about reaching orbit or docking with a station. It is about accepting that every time we climb into that seat, we place ourselves at the edge of survival. What matters is not avoiding risk entirely, because that is impossible. What matters is preparing for it, confronting it, and enduring when the worst happens. That is what Soyuz 18 was for me. Not a failed mission. A survival. And a reminder that as long as we return, the path forward remains open.